say per capita, but it's a good area to be in.
Yeah, wonderful. I didn't
for technology.
Control systems also would catch, lot of attention of cybersecurity. I mean, we were overhearing such issues on control systems, on some specific locations. We were overhearing. Good to be listening to the real experts. Nice to be with you.
Yeah.
To know.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk about this risk management framework, which is the new thing in DoD that's gotten a lot of attention. So that's really what they're rolling out as the solution.
Oh, so DoD.
I don't know if you. So I'll be talking. Yeah.
Yes.
So, with your kind permission, shall we start?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So, greetings to all global community, galaxy of intellectuals, dignitaries, keynote speakers, delegates, and participants from all over India and abroad. I wish you all good health during the tough times of COVID-19. I'm Anupama Thakur, Chair of IEEE AcSIR-CSIO Student Branch, and we are here organizing this branch is under the patronage of IEEE Delhi section under India Council, and it gives me immense pleasure and pride to offer you all a gracious welcome on behalf of the organizing team, that is IEEE AcSIR-CSIO Student Chapter and Nanotechnology Chapter, and also IEEE Communication Society Delhi Section Chapter. So I welcome you to the 3-day event of IEEE Virtual Colloquium that is themed on cybersecurity. And to start with, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome and invite our branch counselor, Dr. H.K. Sardana, Chief Scientist at CSIR-CSIO, for a welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anupama, and welcome. Good morning, Dr. Susan, and good evening to our participants all over the country and elsewhere. Really nice to have the first session by Dr. Susan, titled, of course, specifically on industrial control systems, largely on cybersecurity. I hope the scholars would gain the general learning on cybersecurity, as well as specific issues on control systems. And I'm looking forward to Dr. Susan, who just shared that she has a lot of experience, both in security as well as, industrial control system in general, and specific control systems which will require such concerns on cybersecurity. So we look forward to a very interesting session today with the first session, agreed by Dr. Susan. Hope you will all enjoy, and welcome everyone present here this evening. Thank you. Over to you, Anupama, for further inviting the speaker.
Thank you, sir. So the fragrance of flowers spreads only in the direction where the wind takes, but the goodness of a person spreads in all directions. With this, I give a red carpet welcome to our honorable and keynote speaker of today's session, that is Ms. Suzanne Kethilen. So she is not only a great motivation to all of us, but a visionary role model for IEEE fraternity. I welcome you, ma'am, and to introduce you to our audience. So Ms. Kethilen works as a program manager for United States federal government agency. Ms. Lent has served 3 terms on the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, that is IEEE Board of Directors, and she has served as a member of IEEE USA Board of Directors in 2013 and 16, as a member of Region 3 Executive Committee 2017 and 16, was president of IEEE Computer Society in 2009. She has more than 30 years of experience in industry in the application of software engineering methodologies, the management of information systems, and leadership of software development teams. Ms. Land is IEEE President-elect and IEEE Fellow, and is also the author and co-author of a number of text, papers, webinars, all supporting sound software engineering principles, and practical application of software process methodologies. So with this brief introduction, I welcome you, ma'am, for your session. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm just so honored to be here today and really appreciate the invitation. So I'm going to take a moment and share my content. So let's see. This works. Okay. And let's see. And stop my video. Okay, so everybody can see my screen.
Yes, ma'am, it's on the screen.
Somebody confirm you can see that? Okay, all right, okay. All right. So I'm so happy to speak with you today and support your virtual speaker series. I understand that tests are going to be given after to some of the students, so I'm sorry about that. That wasn't my intention when I signed up to give the talk. But the mission, as you heard, I've been involved in IEEE for a while, but the mission of IEEE technical activities, which is part of IEEE, is to foster the development and facilitate the exchange of scientific and technical knowledge that benefits its members, the profession, and humanity. And I'm always happy to play the role in IEEE technical activities. I believe strongly in IEEE mission and vision and try to support all our activities. And I hope you enjoy my talk today. Trying to get it to advance this. Okay. All right. So, however, I'm not here to talk to you about IEEE. I'm talking about cybersecurity considerations for today's industrial control systems. And as I move through my agenda, I'm going to talk to take a look back at the predictions for 2017 and 2018. I know we're in 2020, but the predictions for 2017 and 2018 tell us what happened in 2019, but we're too early in this year to really talk about the results for 2020. What I can talk about is what happened over the past 2 years, the predictions and realizations, and if the experts were right. This is important because we need to know if we're putting protections in place to protect against the predicted threats. I'm going to take a look at where we think we really are from a risk posture, and then I'm going to talk about the differences and similarities between traditional IT and industrial control systems when considering the cyber threat for an industrial control system. Are there things that make these systems unique? Next, I'm going to provide you with a series of recommendations for cyber risk prevention and some guidance. And lastly, I'll close with some typical mistakes we see over and over, even with the best cyber prevention frameworks in place. So I'm going to give you just a brief bit of my technical background. For the past 13 years, I've been chief engineer and now program manager for something called Command Control Battle Management Communications, or C2BMC product development. You'll see it at the bottom of the slide. So C2BMC is the command and control and network infrastructure that connects the sensors with the shooters as part of U.S. ballistic missile defense infrastructure. People are sometimes confused as to the mission of the Missile Defense Agency, and it is to defend the United States, its deployed forces, allies, and friends from missile attacks in all phases of flight. As I described, I'm going to talk about industrial control systems and cybersecurity. I'm not going to talk about my U.S. missile defense systems, but I'll leverage my experience with these mission and safety critical systems. There are many analogies that can be drawn between systems that I work on and other safety or operationally critical industrial control systems, particularly in the way that the legacy and proprietary structure is fielded and integrated, the way that critical cybersecurity patching is deployed, and vulnerabilities are targeted. So industrial control systems manage industrial processes. These include food manufacturing, utilities generation and transmission, oil and gas production and distribution. Our lives are incredibly impacted by this type of engineering. And to think of the impact that cybercrime could have in this area and how we might truly be impacted should all give us pause. Thankfully, these systems have been into attacks because the industrial control system environment is unique, meaning that attackers bent on crashing a local power grid or some other environment would need time, money, and patience and access to determine how to disrupt it. In 2017, we saw Triton, or Trisis, which was an attack on Schneider Electric. This malware was designed to manipulate the industrial safety systems. In this specific attack, hackers apparently intended to manipulate the layers of built-in emergency shutdown protocols to keep the system running while they bored deeper and gained more control. Fortunately, in this attack, though, the malware accidentally triggered system emergency system shutdowns that gave it away. From my research, it seems that we're poised for growth. From all the threats that have been tracked, most of the activity started in 2016 and 2017. And as you'll see, the data points to ever-increasing growth in this space, which is really concerning. So the headlines are quite tantalizing, as you saw, but I wanted to look at what the cyber labs and their researchers were predicting to see how we're really doing currently. Are we really better off or not? Were their predictions correct? Are we protecting our systems from the right threats? So I turned to the reporting agencies. The best that I found, or the most, what I thought were the most thorough, were predictions from Symantec and Kaspersky Labs. I wanted to look at one U.S.-based company and one non-U.S.-based company. Both of these are known for their development of antivirus software and their extensive research in the areas of cyber threat prevention. And if you look, only one, Kaspersky, can boast a racing team, which I thought was pretty funny. So although there are a number of key predictions in these two reports, I'm going to focus on four that I think are carrying through all of the years. I think these are consistent and persistent, serious infrastructure threats. The first is more router and modem attacks. So think of your router as a translator, and it's the perfect host for man-in-the-middle attacks. Compromised routers are the worst thing that can happen to computer users. So I was reading an article in Computer World, and I found this great analogy regarding hacked routers. I try to explain things sort of in simple terms. So if you're trying to talk to someone who doesn't speak your language and you're using a translator, you're at the mercy of that translator. If the translator is malicious, you can imagine how disastrous the conversation might be. So likewise, your router is in the middle of every communication you have on the internet. Next are predictions associated with more high-end mobile malware. Mobile devices can generally be broken down into two broad categories, personal and corporate. I'm going to talk about this prediction because of the corporate category. Mobile devices contain applications, documents, stored credentials, and often sensitive business information. When hacked by malware, these can provide a toehold into corporate or associated ICS networks. I'll talk about the prediction Infrastructure as a Service, or IaaS breaches. Infrastructure as a Service is a form of cloud computing that provides virtualized computing resources over the internet. A third-party provider hosts hardware, servers, storage, and other infrastructure components on behalf of its users. What we're talking about here is basically outsourcing the management of your cybersecurity to a third party. Not the responsibility, but the management. And last, we'll talk about supply chain hacks. This is where a cyber attack exploits a weak link in the supply chain. According to a 2016 Accenture survey, more than 60% of cyber attacks originate from the supply chain or from external parties exploiting supply chain vulnerabilities. And this is becoming more and more important, especially as we're in this era of COVID. This type of attack can be as simple as corrupting a vendor's patch or infiltrating a code-based production environment. So you can see from this slide that the number of attacks in 2017, 2018 and have dramatically increased. This might have seemed to be a relatively obvious prediction to make, but I'm not going to talk about all of these attacks, but we'll mention a few. The NotPetya gained administrator access on a machine and leveraged that power to commandeer other computers network, taking advantage of the fact that far too many organizations employ flat networks in which an administrator on one endpoint controls other machines. The FlockSIP hack infected 2.2 million worldwide with a backdoor. Attackers specifically targeted 18 companies, gaining access to names like Samsung, Sony, Intel, Chunghwa, and Fujitsu. In the attack on South Korea, hackers compromised a commercial antivirus package to provide a path to breach and steal South Korean classified military data, including wartime contingency plans jointly developed by South Korea and the United States. From May to September 2018, there was an average of 7 cyber attacks per month. One of the most prominent was Costco shipping outage on July 24, 2018. After initially manifesting at the port of Long Beach, the attack against the shipping firm spread across 9 countries on 2 continents. Moreover, the threat actor named Leafminer has targeted business verticals in finance, energy, telecommunications, construction, and more. So, were predictions right? The data from the first half of 2018 does indeed show us that the percentage of ICS computers attacked has increased by 3.5 percentage points, reaching 41.2%. In 2018, a CrowdStrike survey in which 1,300 senior IT decision makers and IT security professionals were interviewed, 2/3 experienced a software supply chain attack in 2018. In the same survey, almost 2/3 admit that they are not prepared for a supply chain attack, and they are vulnerable in only about 1/3 place prevention of supply chain attacks as one of their top 3 cybersecurity IT prevention strategies. In 2019, 300 cybersecurity incidents impacting supply chain entities last year occurred, with the most common attack coming in the form of company crippling ransomware. So I heard about the most widely publicized Modem hack in 2018 when the U.S. issued a warning. The warning included home office routers, and I could not remember my password. It had been so long since I changed my own. A rare UK-US alert noted that Russian hackers were targeting infrastructure developers, ISP providers, and even home office customers should all take protective action as routers, switches, firewalls, and network intrusion detection systems were key vulnerabilities. Additionally, a relatively recent pretty basic vulnerability was discovered with 4GEE mini modems, the system allowing the replacement of service manager.exe, opening up the targeted computer to exploitation. So I would say the predictions were right. Sorry. So I would say the predictions were right again, and we did see the increased router and modem hacks. Another prediction from 2017 and 2018 reports was the more high-end mobile malware. I was curious. I wanted to see how bad the data trends were for this. And you can see from the data that these attacks have risen from just under 12.5 million to over 812 million per year. It's quite substantial. Where these types of attacks are concerning for ICS are the interface touch points or access points where they offer up system cyber vulnerabilities. Environmental awareness is key. What I found is that mobile malware is on the rise, with the number of new malware variants for mobile increasing by over 54% in 2018. What is surprising is that over the last year, Mac operating system malware has increased by 165%. So we think we were safe with Mac. So what about the percent, or what about the prediction that data breaches associated with the usage of infrastructure as a service increased in 2018? We saw that U.S. retail data breaches more than doubled during the first half of 2018, rising 50% from 19%. Nearly 40% of the traffic that is seen across hotel and travel sites is classified as impersonators of browsers. That's amazing to me. So here are some of the biggest data breaches this year, or in 2018. In March of 2018, Facebook data breach and Cambridge Analytica collected the personal information of millions of Facebook users. Facebook notified 87 million users that they had a breach. In September, another Facebook hack. The estimates of that at that point were between 14 and 50 million records of personal data were breached. Not to be outdone, a security researcher disclosed another app called nametest.com had publicly exposed information of more than 120 million users. So April of 2018, Panera Bread and Lord & Taylor, in June, it was Ticketfly and the Sacramento Bee. So this prediction was also correct for 2018. So I'd like to take a moment and talk about the differences and similarities between industrial control systems and traditional information processing systems. And I'd like to state up front that there are similarities, but in the world of industrial control systems, cybersecurity engineer is different. Although some of the characteristics are similar, industrial control systems also has characteristics that differ from traditional information processing systems. Many of these differences stem from the fact that the logic executing in an ICS has a different effect on the physical world. So I've listed the two types of systems on this slide and offer a comparison. Some of the ICS characteristics include significant risk to the health and safety of human lives and serious damage to the environment, as well as serious financial issues such as production losses, negative impact to the nation's economy, and compromise of proprietary information. The critical thing to remember is that the application of cybersecurity protocols in a traditional information technology environment is challenging, but implementing these controls in an ICS environment can often block or delay the flow of information through these networks, resulting in unintended changes to instructions, commands, or alarm thresholds, or in sending inaccurate information to operators, which could have various negative effects. So I've spoken about cyber risk and the nature of the operating environment, but I'd like to talk about what you might do to prepare or fight the cyber threat. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the phrase defense in depth. The idea behind defense in depth is to manage your cyber risk with a layered and diverse defensive strategy, so that if one layer of defense turns out to be inadequate, you have multiple layers of protection and more layers of detection. However, from an implementation standpoint, defense in depth simply means you need to look at your cybersecurity strategy holistically. Looking at the rings represented here, you can't simply only focus on 2 or 3 rings, excluding the others. You have to have a successful cybersecurity program and consider everything. So I'll be touching on a few of the key items listed here today, but not discussing physical security or the development of specific policies and procedures. I try to focus on those things that relate to the highest risk items reported by Kaspersky and Symantec, as well as the items I know from my own experience that are of vital importance. So if you're developing software or receiving software that is developed specifically for your systems, you need to pay special attention to their associated cyber vulnerabilities as well. These are things that may be shipping with your delivered code. The first couple on the list are random number generators and password hashes that are shipped standard with your programming languages. Generally not the ones you want to depend on if you're trying to develop code or support secure computer systems. When software generates predictable values in a context requiring unpredictability, it may be possible for an attacker to guess the next value that will be generated and use this guess to impersonate another user or access sensitive information. If you're sitting there wondering just who would use these defaults, well, I don't know if you remember my FitnessPal account hack, where 150 million accounts in 2018. Some portion of those passwords were only hashed using SHA-1. So check all the available vulnerability databases. These exist. They're readily available. You can just look at them, look for them on Google or any search engine for the languages you're using. So I just did a quick lookup for GNU-C, which is the language used on many Linux systems. And there's a pretty serious issue. It was reported at the end of 2018, identified that can be triggered with the getAddressInfo library function. So an incorrectly formatted reply to this function will cause an overflow. There are multiple ways that the target system can receive a malicious reply. But simply put, an attacker could use a DNS reply to run code on a targeted Linux system using this. Lastly, change the default and admin passwords for your firewalls, routers, and databases. So just to revisit the basics, it's important to utilize authentication, authorization, and encryption. In authentication, the user or computer has to prove its identity to the server or client. If you're only employing single-factor authentication, your systems are vulnerable. Multi-factor authentication can lessen the likelihood of a data breach via a compromised password, and can be something you know, like as a PIN, or something you have like a token, or something you are as like a facial recognition app. In authorization, the server determines if the client has permission to access a file or use a resource and limits access or the operations performed. With encryption, the data is transformed so it's encrypted. Although encryption is good, authenticated encryption is recommended in today's environments, and it provides both data privacy and integrity. I've listed some recommended references for the employment of authenticated encryption. If you're responsible for complex systems of having properly documented network diagrams is critical. You would not believe the times I've walked into complex systems and after the architecture or the diagrams, and they're not available. If you've ever had a failure, try to diagnose the root cause. If you don't have current diagrams, you just won't be able to do it. Diagrams are critical when you can't afford system red time, and you need to diagnose critical system infrastructure failures. Regardless of the size and complexity of your network, it's always a good idea to have current logical design of your network documented, which should include information such as IP addressing, servers, all devices, everything. Think about this and ask yourself an honest question. If your network is down and your usual go-to network guru administrator is not available and you have to call in a replacement, someone with no knowledge of your network, given the diagrams you currently have on hand, how long would it take for the network to restore? So most people have an understanding of how firewalls are used to protect private networks from public networks. There are software and hardware that protect a network from external threats. And you can think of the intrusion detection systems as the next barrier of protection. It's passive. If it's passive, it detects an intrusion and sets off an alarm, like a home alarm detecting an intruder and notifying the police. Additionally, an IDS system can also detect system user attacks that originate internally from within your organization. So I've listed the two types of IDS systems, network and host-based, and their advantages and disadvantages. And to briefly summarize these, the network-based IDS are easier to deploy and detect network-based attacks. Host-based IDS generate fewer false positives and detect attacks that are host-based. Your specific requirements would drive the type of system or combinations of systems you would need to deploy. So I just described a reactive type of secondary defensive network protection system. This next type, an intrusion prevention system, is a much more proactive type of system that can be employed to preemptively block application attacks. While intrusion detective system, or IDS, detects alarms, an intrusion prevention system monitors network traffic in the same manner, again detecting malicious inputs and then stops detected incidents. There are unique challenges when employing intrusion detection and prevention systems with industrial control systems. Many of these systems have been built up over years and include legacy and custom code that often lead to incorrect flagging and blocking of valid information. So there are lots of challenges. Many organizations are slow to adopt these second-tier protective mechanisms and rely on air gap separation for protections. What I mean is they isolate their networks. They think they're isolated. More than one of these businesses has learned the hard lesson that air gaps do not protect against cybercrime. If your organization is currently employing air gaps and you don't have your private cyber infrastructure connected to anything externally, you can still protect yourself with firewalls and more preferably second-tier protections like an IDS or IPS. Too many times with air gaps, a well-intentioned employee comes in with a USB or temporary cable and your air gap is gone. So I've included this diagram for illustrative purposes just to provide an example of a network with an intrusion detection employed. The deployment of an IPS or IDS is not simple. It's not an easy fix. If poorly architected and poorly implemented, these products could significantly affect your network traffic. Look for the ability to use clustering or to share processing connections, thus enhancing performance and reducing downtime. An intrusion prevention system should capture and analyze traffic, so it has to separate the analysis component onto a dedicated server. For high security industrial control systems requires a network with lower security systems, cross-domain solutions are employed. These security devices ensure that data flows are permitted and protected from high security systems to the lower security environment. So this is a simple graphic of a cross-domain solution showing two domains and how a data diode is employed for content inspection within a transfer CDS. So you can see the internal firewalls and then the transfer CDS in the middle, and then the content inspector with the filters. And we call it the low side and the high side, but it allows traffic to go back and forth. So as I touched on previously, industrial control systems may contain proprietary software and network interfaces. Basically what I mean by that is legacy. It's usually legacy code. Today, these systems are increasingly merging with corporate systems and their use of non-proprietary systems like Windows operating systems. These integration challenges are complex, particularly when you factor in cybersecurity risk. It's scary to think that when surveyed, only about half of the industrial control system security practitioners regularly applied vendor patches to their systems. That's scary. It's something that is easy to understand if you've ever worked on a legacy system, though. The application of a vendor patch can simply render your system unusable. In many of these businesses that have these legacy systems do not have software programmers that are maintaining these legacy environments. Additionally, in an ICS environment, typical enterprise IT doesn't work. Small maintenance windows are part of the problem. When things must run around the clock for 24 hours, sometimes there is just once a year when there's enough downtime to do a security upgrade. The development of a gap assessment or the documentation of detailed knowledge of your cyber vulnerabilities for your legacy systems is key here, along with how you're managing this risk. It's one way to cope with this upgrade and integration challenges. So again, with this slide with the current failure rates for the larger drives. We're storing larger and larger amounts of data. We're becoming complacent. I can remember when disk failures were a regular occurrence. You know, I've been working for like 30 years, and we used to have disk failures all the time. And we had failure recovery plans, right? We had disk failover and all these things. And we practiced these failover plans. Failover was a fact of life. Now, even with hardware costs continuing to fall, I have to champion to ensure that failover and contingency planning remain above the cut lines in my IT budgets. But, you know, if your data is important, you need to ensure that it's routinely backed up to a physically secure location that's not vulnerable. Also, be sure you practice restoration procedures, and the data is no good if you can't retrieve it. So I've had just enough time today to touch on some of the current cybersecurity risks that are out there and to talk about some of the prevention techniques that are available and a few of the challenges, but where can you go for help? So I've presented an overview of the industrial control system, security lifecycle, and some of the standards and other available resources that are out there for you to use. What we're using in DoD is called the Risk Management Framework. The framework consists of 826 controls and enhancement controls, and incorporates security categorizations, information system descriptions, system boundaries, monitoring strategies, and patch management strategies. You'll be really, for those of you that have to take a test, I'm not going to go into the risk management detail here today. In the backup portion of this briefing, I've included some additional detail associated with the risk management framework for those of you that might be interested. So what this does is risk management framework is really an approach that allows you to assess your system, assess the risk, allows managers to some of that risk, and then move forward and adjust your controls and put the procedures and whatever you need in place for your cybersecurity controls. So it's really a more reasonable, even though it does seem to be overwhelming first when you implement it. And what we implemented it over a series of years. So anyway, all right. So I can't leave today without mentioning some things that I think are typical rookie mistakes. I call them TRM. I've been in software development or as a developer first, or as a program manager for many years on a variety of systems. And I see the same cyber issues or common mistakes, and I feel compelled to highlight these in closing. As any systems administrator or individual responsible for cybersecurity will tell you that the number one risk is the end user. It's just a fact of life. We need to ensure that our users are following secure access procedures. Many times an attack or exposure is simply the result of a password left written in the wrong place or a logon left unattended. And phishing, you know, clicking on that email or link is really still a huge issue. In 2018, the Department of Justice indicated that 9 Iranian hackers who attacked more than 300 universities in the United States and abroad, they infiltrated 144 U.S. universities, 176 universities in 21 other countries, and 47 private companies and other targets at the United Nations, the U.S. Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they stole 31 terabytes of data, estimated to be worth $3 billion in intellectual property. And it all started with phishing emails. Okay, so remember, I don't know if you heard, there was a massive botnet that took over the internet a few years ago, and it worked by hacking millions of insecure Internet of Things devices, then combining their power. It was kind of like a zombie horde to become an internet destabilizing super botnet. It was only able to do that because of the many IoT devices. They have a bad default password. So remember, passwords are often overlooked as a last line of defense. So California has passed a law banning default passwords like admin or 123456 or the old classic password, and a new consumer electronics law, and it started in January 2020. And this applies to every new gadget built in the state, from routers to home tech and it have to come with they have to come with reasonable security features out of the box. So we're starting to mandate some of the states are starting to mandate that in the U.S. So I'm going to highlight the top 5 common network security vulnerabilities. The first is missing patches. Many incidents occur because hackers exploit unpatched systems, and I mentioned this previously. It's important to follow network security best practices and keep your systems as up to date as possible. This is often a challenge in legacy systems, as I previously mentioned, and if your systems are not up to date, you must understand your risk posture. The second is weak or default passwords. Change all default passwords and test for weak passwords. Use a password management tool as support for enforcement. The third is misconfigured firewall rule bases. Do not assume your firewall is working. Analyze your rule bases. You might be surprised to find some serious configuration weaknesses that allow for unauthorized access. The fourth on the list is mobile devices, phones and laptops and other mobile devices. You know, think of the VPN connections, the cached passwords in those web browsers, and the use of unsecured web browsers. Make mandatory data encryption part of your security policy. And lastly, USB flash drives and securities to support external storage devices. Ensure you have security policies for all personal storage devices and restrict computers that can read USB flash drives. So why a fax machine? Why do you see a little guy on the screen with a fax machine? Who uses fax machines? Well, believe it or not, a vulnerability identified in 2018, in August, late in the year, that 45 million fax machines are still in use globally, and they all have network connectivity. A vulnerability exists where hackers can easily find the company fax number, and they can send files, and they are sending files that exploit the buffer flow vulnerabilities for a number of popular all-in-one fax printers. The malicious payload is loaded, sent to the fax, decoded, and uploaded into the fax printer's memory, and then spread throughout the network. While a patch is available for this exploit, this is an example of why it's so important to stay current with every device supported on the network. Think of how many companies are probably not looking out for the patches or the most current patches for the fax machine. As previously discussed, your patches stay as current as possible. Default configurations for COTS software, that's commercial off the shelf, should be changed and stay current. There are 2 data breaches I'm going to mention that hit me personally in the last couple of years that were the direct result of legacy systems where patching was not kept current. These were the Office of Personnel Management and Equifax hacks. As professionals working with industrial control systems, we should have to make sure our systems are secure and safe. Nothing drives this home more personally than when you have to sign up for personal identity protection. So I'm going to close today with a quote I think sums up how our approach to cybersecurity it shouldn't matter what our operating environment and the associated challenges we face. It should be a process, not a product. As you've heard, the threats are ever present and are always changing. Our landscape should adapt. I would like to thank you for your time and attention. My name is Susan Land. I go by Kathy, and you can reach me at the address on this slide, skland@IEEE.org. For those that know me, I always answer my email. So if you have any questions I can answer today, you can send them to me, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. So thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for a very insightful session. So we have a couple of questions in the chat box window. So I'll read them for you. So the first question is from Mr. Aryan, and he's asking that there is a security key concept that uses binary digits, that is 0 and 1, as well as encryption. So his question is, can we implement any technique to change these digits continuously in real time as IP changes in case of hacking? So in order to increase the security. So ma'am, could you comment on this?
I don't know of any current techniques to do that. I'm sure that they're working on encryption algorithms, and there are new, those are changing all the time. So I'm sure the next best encryption algorithm is coming out. They're changing every day, just about.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So, any other question from any participants? Because I cannot see any question answer. Okay, so there is one question which has recently written by one of our participants. So, how safe are Linux-based systems? Are there any serious instances of attacks against Linux OS?
Yeah, so I mentioned one, and there are, so every operating system has vulnerabilities, and all you have to do is go out and Google and see what patches they're recommending, what vulnerabilities. There are vulnerability databases for each and every programming language and operating system. So don't take my word for it. Go out there and Google it yourself. Every programmer who's working in any kind of language should know. If you're working in let's say Java, you should also have a link to the vulnerability database for your language. So when I hire programmers, that's one of the questions I ask them is, what vulnerability database do you use? And if they can't answer that question, they don't get hired.
Okay. So our next question is from Prakash Meena. So he's asking, please could you share some details about RSA algorithm? How can we use it effectively?
So I am not an algorithm expert. So I don't know details about the RSA algorithm.
Okay.
So I don't know. You'd have to do some research on that. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Okay, no issues, ma'am. Okay, so any questions from the panelists? Dr. Shazana sir, Panda ma'am, Prashant sir?
Yeah, madam, this is Prashant Chugh here. I just wanted to ask from you that with quantum computers coming up fast, how is this ICS security going to be affected? Can you please throw some light on that?
So repeat your question. I see a question in the chat, but I don't think that was your question. Can you repeat it?
I was telling that with quantum computers coming up, how is industrial control system security going to be affected? Are there special plans for securing industrial control systems with the advent of quantum computers?
Yeah, I don't think so. Industrial control systems are used in industry. Their plants operation, their plant operations, their power plants, these are a lot of times legacy systems. They're operating on margin. They usually don't even have people that are maintaining the software that they're using. And they don't have cybersecurity in place, so I really doubt that they would be using the latest and greatest tech. So, unfortunately, no, I don't see that. Unless maybe it's, I don't see it.
Because the quantum computers advancement is definitely a threat to the cryptographic algorithms, and a lot of work is being done in post-quantum cryptography. But with respect to industrial control systems, specifically, is there a plan to secure industrial control systems from the potential attacks from quantum computers?
Right. Now, if they could come up with maybe new encryption algorithms or something that could be deployed as software, I could see that. But really, the industrial control systems that I work with or that I see, maybe in some of the DoD environments, yes. But in real industry control systems, these systems are just trying to bring themselves up into the modern age. The guys I'm talking to, the real people in industry, they're working legacy systems.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so ma'am, there's one question from one of our participants. So she's asking at Ravneet, she's asking, what is the scope of polynomial encryption in cybersecurity? Polynomial encryption.
So say it one more time. It's hard. You're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, ma'am, I'm saying she's asking about the scope of polynomial encryption in cybersecurity.
Of polynomial encryption?
Yes, ma'am. You got
The
it right.
scope?
Scope of polynomial encryption in cybersecurity.
So I don't understand the scope of polynomial encryption. I know that so there's all types of encryption that is used, and the more robust the encryption, the better. I do know that that when you, like I mentioned in my talk, don't ever take the encryption that's out of the box with your software. And there's encryption. So I can tell you that there's proprietary encryption. There's encryption that that you, I don't know how I can. There's encryption that company proprietary encryption, government proprietary encryption. I really don't know what she means by scope, but there's all types of encryption that's deployed. So it's a very sort of shady area. So I don't know how to address the question.
Okay, Susan, there is one question from Shubham. He wants to know about the importance of firewall in cybersecurity.
Okay, so firewalls are, you heard me talk about the cross-domain solution, right? That's sort of one type. Firewalls are extremely important. I mean, you cannot, I talked about how some industrial control systems think they can isolate with air gaps. You don't have firewalls, you just have your systems, isolated. But the minute somebody comes in and they hook up a cable or put a USB in, you've breached your security. So you really have to have firewalls, and and not only firewalls, you have to make sure your firewalls don't just have the default settings. You have to make sure that they're set up correctly. So they're incredibly important.
So would you recommend a honeypot or DMZ internet network?
It just depends on so every network is different, and you have to look at what your requirements are for your network. So I would recommend getting someone that's a network specialist to look at it and tell you what you require. Every network requirement is different. If you put in the wrong firewall, your network's going to get really bogged down. So you need to make sure that you get, and if it's put in at the wrong place, so you have to get a network specialist in to look at it.
Right. Next question is from Yogesh. Does blockchain, I don't know, wait.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you broke up.
Yes, ma'am, he's asking that does blockchain implementation reduces the risk of cyber attacks as there is no central point for storing data?
No. That's such a myth. So everybody thought blockchain was going to come out and be like the solution for no cybersecurity hacks. And so you can go out there and do the research yourself, but blockchain is not proving out to be the solution everybody thought it was. So I won't get into the argument today with everyone, but no, blockchain is not hack proof.
So any other questions from our participants?
Okay.
I have some in my chat. It says
yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, you can take it.
Was there a question? I have some in my chat. Okay, so it says, does post-quantum cryptography, I think we answered that one. And the one I see is just the current industry standard for cryptography. What is the current industry standard for cryptography in protocols in ICS? So there is, I'm not aware, I showed you a bunch of standards there. I have them in the backup, not necessarily for cryptography for in ICS, but for remediation. But there are standards or protocols for cryptography. I'm not familiar with exactly what those are. I'm sure there's always standards for everything. So you could research those and find out. I can't tell you what they are here today. There's always a standard for something, so I'm sure there is, but not necessarily for ICS. It would just be the standard for, you know, cryptography or protocols, because there's always a standard for something. But I don't think it would just be for ICS.
There is one more interesting question. You have shown about the IoT bot attack. How does Industry 4.0 shape systems plans to tackle such threats?
Can you repeat that? It broke up a little. I'm sorry. It's cutting out.
Since you have mentioned about IoT bot attack, I think I missed the question. Yeah. Since you have mentioned about the IoT bot attack, so how does Industry 4.0 systems plans to tackle such threats?
I got IoT and Industry 4.0, and then I missed the last part.
So, ma'am, basically, Ankit was asking that how do we plan to tackle the upcoming threats like IoT bot attack? What are the strategies for that? What are the new or upcoming strategies we are working for such kind of attacks?
I got IoT, but I didn't get the last word.
Okay.
So I don't understand the question.
I
don't understand the threat.
Okay, I just share,
IoT.
I share in the chat box.
Okay. Oh, bot attack. I was like, what are you saying? Okay, bot attack. Based on the recent IoT bot attacks. Well, so basically, what these bot attacks do is it's not anything about Industry 4.0 systems. This all has to do with system vulnerabilities. So what they do is they exploit software and system vulnerabilities when people are not patching their software. So these bot attacks basically exploited unpatched systems. So when you know, you've got to keep your systems patched, you've got to keep your network firewalls configured robustly. It's all of the things I talked about in my talk. So that it's not some major, you know, plan that people have to put together. It's just common cyber security common sense and making sure. But the problem with industry control systems is that these are legacy systems and they're not maintained, they're not patched, they're not kept up. And I was telling a story to the panelists before we started that I spoke at a big IEEE Industrial Control Systems conference, and there were like 2,000 people at this conference at lunch. And the chair of the conference asked me to come speak, and he said, we've never had a speaker on cybersecurity, and I want you to come speak because, and it's not my expertise. I mean, I'm a program manager, right? But it's a big part of what we do I have to make sure my systems are robust because can you imagine if my systems are hacked, right? But he said, I want you to come and scare the audience. and make sure that they understand the vulnerabilities for these critical systems that they're working on, because their systems are not kept up. They don't. Sometimes a lot of these people don't even have a cybersecurity manager. You know, they don't have programmers. They just field their systems. They have somebody develop software, and they field their system, and then it sits there for 10 years. And then it's so vulnerable. And a lot of these are very critical infrastructure, utilities, you know, plants, food production plants, very critical, you know, infrastructure things that we've got fielded. So, so that's sort of how I got involved in this topic that you're hearing today. But anyway, it's not, I don't know how industry plans systems. I guess they make sure that when they're fielded, that the people that are owning the system keep them current.
Okay. One last question, which was asked by a number of participants, that if they are new to the cybersecurity field, so how they can start their career or start learning about it, how they can proceed with it in general.
So I think the best thing you can do is my advice is to get a great foundation in computer science, understand software engineering, and then get a job, an internship or a job working cyber. Get a job somewhere. If you have a foundation in computer science or software engineering, computer science would be the career field. That you get a job in some kind of cyber field. Anybody that's a cyber security professionals, people are clamoring to hire them right now. But they're looking for people, especially in the U.S., for people with computer science degrees, because you have to understand software and you have to understand systems. If you get somebody in cyber security and they do not understand computer science, they're not that great at their job. So that's how you get in. Get a degree in computer science.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So any discussions or comments from the panelists?
May I?
Yes, sir.
Susan, I had initially observing your predictions when you mentioned some industries predicting such attacks. So I'm just thinking loudly whether there are any independent researches on such predictions, because they seem to be more having some bit of conflict of industrial interest as well.
So the predictions that I provided you are from independent researchers. Kaspersky and Symantec are the two companies, and they're independent researchers.
Okay, so that's quite fair. I thought they do have products for you know, handling those attacks.
Right, they have products, but they're independent. They have independent labs, and their labs come out with big independent research reports every year. So they're really the go-to. One's in Russia and one's in the U.S., but they're really the reports that are followed by industry, you know, every year. They're kind of the anxiously awaited reports every year about what's going to happen. What do we need to protect against? Another one is Norton, but Norton's not really as looked to as much as Kaspersky and Symantec. You really do look to the people that are, because they rely, that's their business, right? Their business model is protecting against viruses, right? So they're the experts. So you look to the experts to tell you what's going to happen in the world of, you know, viruses and cybercrime. But they do have independent labs, and that's who produces the reports. I don't know if you know of somebody else that produces these types of reports. I know, but that's who I found.
Good enough. Yeah.
Any other question or comment from the panelists before we end today's session? Any comment?
Sapna, the talk was very informative, and I find it very relevant in the current situation when we have a lot of Internet of Things, millions of devices connecting. I think it's the right time we need to ensure each of the device is secure enough, or a small breach in one device might lead the entire network getting hacked. So I think cybersecurity is a must right now as you talk went. It was informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna ma'am. Any comments from Prashant sir, Chair of IEEE Communication Society Daily Section Chapter?
I just want to thank ma'am. It was a very excellent talk. I thank you very much for this excellent talk, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So,
And happy Independence Day.
yes, happy Independence Day,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Same to you, ma'am. So before ending the
Yes, I request Dana sir for vote of thanks. Sir, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan, for an interesting deliberation, and I hope you enjoyed the diversity of questions and the initial concerns that the participants showed. And I thank the organizers and the various chapters involved, particularly the Delhi section as well, and the audience who remained spellbound, raising questions all over. So thank you for such an interesting talk, and we look forward to more of such learning from you in the other forums. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And we are happy to share this certificate of recognition that our team has prepared for you, and hope you will, as a memento from the participants and the organizers. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. That's very nice.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So on this note, let's conclude a remarkable and phenomenal and knowledgeable experience of day one. So I look forward for all the participants for the session tomorrow. So thank you, Suzanne ma'am, for your time and for your wonderful talk. And we look forward for your guidance in near future. Yes, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us. See you
Thank you
tomorrow.
everyone for joining.
Thank you all panelists.